everybody. Now we're going to be dealing with Parsha Trumah, which is found in Exodus chapter 25, verse 2. We all know that Trumah is mentioned 3 times in the first 2-3 verses here, and we have a custom based on remembering what was done in the temple. The temple times, we had to offer, it was a gift. The word Trumah is a gift. We had to offer every year at this time of the year. Today's Rosh Chodesh Adar. We just had Parsha Shkalim, where the announcement was basically made that Adar is coming. And we read Parsha Shkalim to remind us that this month we're collecting the half shekel towards the communal offerings. When I mean communal offerings, I mean the daily offerings, the incense, the musaf, the additional offerings on Shabbat and the holidays. What happens is, if every Jew gives half a shekel by the 1st of Nisan, that's the new financial year, so then every korban, every offering that is brought up on a communal offering, I mean, if I had to bring my own sin offering or Thanksgiving offering, that's from my pocket. But these offerings are bought, the communal offerings are bought from this kuppah, from the collection that was made during this month. So how's it done? So remember, Eretz Yisrael is bigger than just Jerusalem, but it has to come to Jerusalem to be put into the bank account of the temple. So what did we do? We set up these tables. First of all, we made the announcement on Rosh Chodesh. Now, every shul, every community, municipality had a tax collector. It's a tax. And he would set up a booth or a table, and people would register and put in their half shekel. Half shekel is about like $11, but it's based on silver. So the silver goes up and down. So they give the money, and anybody who didn't give the money comes the second half of the month, the day after Purim, then the tax collectors go knocking on doors. This is very important for us to know this, because we're going to be discussing this for the next hour and a half at least. And they can force you, right? It's a head tax that was forced. Now, the first time we gave this Trumah, there were 3 half shekels. I shouldn't say that. We, as a custom, give 3 half shekels. And we give it on the fast of Esther, which is the day before Purim. Now, in this chapter, in Trumah, there were 2 half shekels, and the third was not evaluated on any financial level. So the 2 half shekels were obligatory, and actually I forgot to bring. Okay, the first of these 3 offerings, the first of the 2 shekels, was used for the adonim, for the sockets that the planks of wood. Now the planks of wood had 2 feet. In other words, it was carved in, and the sockets had 2 holes. But don't be mistaken, those planks with the 2 holes didn't go directly into that socket. Only one of the feet went into one of the sockets, and then the next plank had one of the 2 feet go into that. So then you built this wall that surrounded the courtyard of the tabernacle, and the tabernacle itself was basically a tent. We had these coverings, but what was holding the coverings up were these planks. So basically, these sockets were heavy silver, and they served as a foundation for the planks. It's going to be very important to know this. Number 2, the second half shekel was used for the communal offerings. And the third offering, the third Trumah, which was not based on the half shekel system, was a free will offering to give whatever you wanted of these 13 specific items or materials that are listed in verse 3, 4, 5, and 6 and 7. Okay? Those verses. So obviously if you gave some wool, is different than linen, and different than gold, and different than a diamond, and different types of precious gems. It's whatever you want. but the shekel was always evaluated on the value of the silver, and everybody gave exactly the same. Whether you were rich or poor, those first two were equal. Didn't matter. It was $11, whatever it is. And the third one was from, if you were wealthy, you had a surplus of one of these items and you wanted to donate more, you were certainly able to. Okay, so the first question that the Kliyat card brings up is based on the fact that we do know that 3 trumos are mentioned in our Parsha. So he has several questions. The first question is, Lama yaches shtei trumos rishonos el Hashem Yisrach? Why are the first 2 somehow related to God, and the third one is related to the giver? Now, let me explain. The first one says, take me an offering. This is God speaking. V'yichuli. So God is somehow related to the offering. And the second one is, tichu et trumati. Take my truma. So somehow God is somehow in the equation and related to this truma because he's putting his name on it. It's his in both of these fashions. The third time it's mentioned, it says, you shall take the truma from them. So it's theirs, it's the giver. Okay, now we're going to go through 5 really, I think they're complicated questions if you don't know the text, and real simple if you do. So as you now can look at the text, which I had one. Copy like this. Let me just borrow this. Oh, I have one there. So read the text together, and I'll show you. Right? Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and let them take for me a portion. We're going to ask a question soon. Why is this words from every man whose heart motivates him in between portion 1 and portion 2? But anyway, portion 2 is, you shall take my portion. And then the third, this is the portion you shall take from them. So you notice in the first 2, it's li, it's ti, but it's God speaking. It's mine, my portion. And the third one, I'm taking your portion. Okay. That's the first question that bothers him. Remember, I'm going to say this for anybody who's listening for the first time. The questions are there to make us think. There's an anomaly. There's something unusual. You tell a story. Why you're repeating it? If it's being repeated, there's some nuance. There's something new. There's such a heavy story here that is. Remember, God spoke. The world came into being. Every letter, every nuance. It's like infinite. It's infinite. It's the word of God.
Yeah.
Infinite wisdom. Okay. Number 2. The second question. Now, if you notice, there's like a word called the portion. We'll call that a noun, right? And then there's a pronoun. So you have like the idea like this. Why do the first 2 portions take the language of taking before the language of portion? Okay, so taking, that's the verb, right? You shall take. And then there's what you're taking. So in the first 2 trumot that are mentioned, it's the kicha, the concept of taking comes before the word or the noun. So the verb comes before the noun in the first 2 portions. Right? We say, take for me a portion. And the second one is, you'll take my portion. But in the third one, it says, this is the portion that you shall take. So what's going on? Okay, this is not bothering you yet, but I'm telling you, by the time we finish these 5 questions, you're not going to sleep tonight if you don't get to hear all the answers. Number 3. As I mentioned, those words from every person whose heart inspires him to generosity, it's only the third one that is actually a free will gift. The first 2 are obligatory. So why do those words from every man whose heart motivates him in between Truma number 1 and Truma number 2? It should be connected to the third, meaning it could be right before, right after the third Trumah, but it should be related to the third Trumah, but it's interrupted by, it's in between the number 1 and number 2. So this really brings home I just want to read what I wrote here. How can the phrase from every person whose heart inspires him to generosity, me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo, be inserted between the first 2 portions, which was an obligated head tax, which is incumbent upon every Israelite male. Who paid these taxes? Who's counted? Now, it doesn't really mean who's counted in God's eyes, but who's counted to pay the taxes? Who's counted to go out to war? The males between the age of 20 and 60, those are the ones who contributed. Those are the ones who go out to war. Okay, I just wanted to fill that you guys in with that. But anyway, this the first 2 portions are not at all dependent on the generous heart of the giver. It's only the third portion, which mentions all of those 13 ingredients or materials that are used. Okay, should I read it in Hebrew? Let's read it in Hebrew. Actually, I'm not going to read any of these in Hebrew because it's going to take too long. Number 3, why in the third portion, the language of taking mentioned at all? If once we already decide that the third portion is the free will gift, right? It's been decided by God, but we understand that third portion was a free will gift, then how is the word kicha, taking, possible? It should be giving. Okay? Which infers a forced taking, whereas a generous offering comes voluntary, which is not forced. Okay, now here's a little bit tricky, and this is deep. This is a little bit of a language for those that take Opan, or have taken Opan, or need to take Opan. The first portion mentions the word v'yikchu, whereas the second 2 have a language of tichu. Okay, what's the difference? Sounds like we're nitpicking here. God created the language. He's the greatest grammarian or grammatician. He knows the language. He created it. So the word tichu is you take. We already saw in number 2 and 3, it's you take. But in the first one, we say, let them take a portion. Take my portion. Let them. So in Hebrew, it's called nistar and nokeach. So Mayor, I'm going to ask your nistar is like the third person. He's not present really. You're talking about him. Let them. But 2 and 3 is you. So we'll call that second person. Do you know a better word for nistar and nokach as opposed to second person and third person? Or nistar is third person and nokeach is second person. Mayor? No. Okay. But that's what's going on here. Okay. Now, another introduction, we have a lot of introductions here. You're not allowed to count Jews. You know that. Mm-hmm. You come to a minyan, you need 10 Jews, how do you do it? If you can't count Jews, how do you know if you have 10? Mind-boggling, right? So we count chairs, you count, you have a verse with 10 words, and you count each word and look at the people, so you know this guy is that word, that guy's that word. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of tricks. You count hats, you can count tzitzis, you can count chairs, I mentioned. So there's he says, the most authorities hold one's not allowed to count Israelites. Rather, they count the coins that are donated in order to save them from the evil eye. So I'll just read that in Hebrew so you know I'm not making it up. Yesh machloked bein Parsha Trumah ki yesh sovrim shelo nimnu Yisrael legul golet. Gul golet, the word for a tire, for a wheel, is a galgal, right? For reincarnation is gilgul, because it's recycled. Gulgolet means the skull. So that's what I call a head tax. It's a skull tax. So we don't count Jews by their heads. Ella hashkalim nimnu. We count the coins they give. So everyone's going to give exactly half shekel. We count it up, divide it in two, and we know how many, or times divided by two, yeah. Did I just do that right?
I think so.
Or times it by two. Anyway, so, in other words, times it by two. In other words, you collect 10 shekel, you know there's 20 Jews. Okay. Now, what does it mean to save you from the ayin hara? I heard a brilliant insight from Rabbi Gladstein. I listen to him regularly now. What is our soul? Okay, this is going to be really hard to explain, but I'll do the best I can. God is the infinite being. Aren't we a portion of God? Aren't we a part of God? If we're a part of God, that means He's divisible. Can't be divisible. God is indivisible. You can't divide God. When you count something, you're dividing it. You say, oh, there's 3 parts, 10 parts, 50, whatever it is. By not counting Jews, and we know that the soul is, I'm going to say it, a part of God, although that's not the right word, but there's no other way to describe it. It's an indivisible part of God. We're recognizing that that's the reality, that the soul is part of God who is indivisible. You cannot divide Him up.
May I ask
Yes,
a question?
please.
Would it be like if you filled this room with water, it would touch every single thing in this room, yet it would not be taken apart or divided or particulated?
Okay, but I don't know if that
It would
fits in this, but okay.
I'm just saying, Hashem breathed on Adam. Am I in a right mindset there?
It sounds great.
Okay.
It doesn't really help us understand this piece, but I added that in, so maybe you just, developed this idea further.
I was playing off the dividing.
Developed it further. But the Abarbanel says, no, we're actually allowed to count Jews, but a tzedakah, the coin has to be given nevertheless, and he uses the word tzedakah as charity, but it acts as how? A kofer nefesh. I'll just read his words. Abarbanel's choylek al de'ezeh. He says you can count. V'amar shenibnu ligogelet mamish. You actually count Jews. V'hashkalim, but the accompanying money is nidnu derek tzedakah. It's given as charity. O kodem haminyan o achrav. It doesn't matter whether it was before the counting or after the counting. L'kofer nefesh, as an atonement for the soul. And we're going to see a verse that proves he's right, but that doesn't mean he's right about counting or not. That's a whole separate issue. I just want to go back to this idea of, in other words, how does it save you from the evil eye? The evil eye cannot affect Hashem. There's no, he's unaffected, he's not changing. So what happens is, even in Jewish law, I mean, we just started learning Jewish law, but in Choshen Mishpat, in civil matters, if somebody else looked into someone else's apartment, it can cause damage. You look into someone's books, into someone's letters, you can cause damage. I think in quantum physics, they say as long as there's no observation, which obviously makes sense, you can't measure anything, but they talk about you can't change anything without the observation. Once someone observes, it actually changes the results, which is absolutely crazy. So we have in laws, like Bilam wanted to curse us, he ended up blessing us. He talked about how modest we were, that the tents were not facing each other. The openings of each of the tents had the doorway was not facing another doorway. And here in Israel, and I'm probably sure in many municipalities, you can't just build buildings wherever you want and have the windows facing other buildings. There has to be a certain distance, and then maybe it's jagged or, I don't know what the word is, but it's not a direct window to another window. Because there is a thing, not just called privacy, but hezek ria, damage caused by someone else looking into the privacy of whatever it is, okay? Okay, so there's an evil eye, whatever that means, that could affect the outcome. And we talk about evil eye, the thing that makes the most sense to me has to do with jealousy, right? Or negative feelings. So people send off vibrations. Someone who has either an anger problem or a jealousy problem or he's got something going on with you, with another person, he's sending vibes. And the eye has a lot of power. This is something I also found out about recently, that we think of the eye as only a receiver. Oh, it just takes in light. Do you know that it also produces light? Your brain is a 12-volt battery, and your eyes. Now, how did I discover this? When I started working with infrared nighttime cameras. You know how they work? The infrared nighttime camera can only pick up an image because it's emitting an infrared ray, a very low voltage. You can barely pick it up if you're looking at it. But it's sending it out. And it's picking up whatever image it can based on what... The eye works in very much the same way. It goes both ways. It's not only a receiver. It also... So therefore, someone with negative intent or negative vibes can actually affect the other physical substance.
Or project.
Okay.
You get that feeling that somebody's staring at you when you don't know.
They've done surveys like that, research. You just know someone's looking at your back. You just know it. And how? Because there's waves. There's whether
You can sense it.
You can sense it, but it's not. It's because it's actually there. Okay. But interestingly enough, so the Abarbanel mentions that it's called a kofer nefesh, and maybe just at this point, just to drive that point home, I think maybe just to look in one of the. We'll have to wait. We'll get to it. Well, I wanted to do it now. It must be. Okay, it's in number 6 in the English source sheets. Exodus 30, verse 15. The rich shall give no more, and the poor shall give no less than half a shekel. Ha'asher lo yarbe. V'hada yamit mimechatzit shekel. To do what? L'teit et trumas Hashem, to give with which to give the offering to the Lord. What is the next words? Lechaper al nafshotechem, to serve as an atonement for your souls. Now, when we count Jews, we know that many plagues have come in the Torah and Tanakh, and so that's one idea. But we'll look at that Rashi later because that's going to be very enlightening. Okay, so let's go back. Now we're on the second Hebrew page, and we're now going to start. I think we're still laying the foundation. The word for free will offering, okay? We saw in the text, it said, I had like a diamond, it said, Kol ish asher yidvenu libo. Yidvenu libo, right? Yidvenu libo. How do you say the word free will offering? So let's say you want to volunteer. You're a mitnadev. Nun is part of the root. Nidava is a free will offering. Okay? This word is not spelled with a nun. Yidvenu libo. So he starts off by telling us this is a good place to explain that word in two very distinct, different fashions. You can look at it as a nidava, a free will offering. And Rashi says, if you look on the source sheet, number 3, so it says the word yidvenu can be explained in two ways. Number 1, simple explanation, and you can see Rashi, nidava, that's how it's spelled, nun daled vav hey, bet hey, sorry, nun daled bet hey, as an expression of goodwill. Okay, does anybody know French? I bet Karen knows French. Karen? No. Okay. Listen to this. Rashi knew Old French. Many times we read Rashi and he's translating for us, so he tells us what it is in Old French. He says, you know what the word nidava means in Old French? Present. Present, which means a gift. A gift. So anyway, if you didn't learn anything tonight, you learned one new Old French word. I don't know if they still use that word. I know that Americans do, English. Okay, so that's one way. So everything we're learning about a free will offering is a gift. Great. Everything's like smooth. But guess what? It doesn't end there. It can also mean the complete opposite. Whoa. How can that be? The complete opposite. He says it can. Because the very fact that the word Yidvenu is not spelled with a nun. And we also have another general rule. There's certain letters that are interchangeable. So the bet without a dot has a soft sound. What does it sound like? A V, right? A vet. That's what we call it, a vet. There's a bet and a vet. And the vav, the bet without the dot, the vet and the vav are interchangeable. So it would spell out without the nun a word called daveh. And daveh means not so willing, meaning painful. You ever give and it was painful to give? Okay, nobody wants to admit it. Everyone's like,
Totally, yeah.
Taxes.
I admit it.
taxes? Okay, this is a tax. This is a tax.
Yeah.
Okay? So, remember, we asked, why is these words, the free will offering, in between number 1 and number 2? Shouldn't it be number 3? 3 was the free will offering. So he says, we know by the first 2, everyone agrees they're totally obligated on everybody. And even if he didn't want to give, he was forced to give. Now we have these things called tax collectors, the Gabayim. The Gabayim are the sextons of the temple, even in the Beit Knesset, a shul. Somebody has to run it, the administrators. And therefore, not only are they sweeping the floors and taking the garbage out, but they're also collecting the taxes. And they can take it, hear the word, by force. Now we understand why the word taking comes before the word truma in the first 2 cases. Because they were obligated, obligatory taxes, and they were able to be taken. And guess what? They were only given because they were obligated. That's like the motivation for the giving, because there were tax collectors. And therefore it's the tax collection themselves that are really the cause for the giving. So it's the kicha, it's the taking, that brings about the giving. But when it came to the third, which is a total free will offering, and it wasn't obligated at all, so even if someone didn't want to give, nobody can force them. That's why the word giving comes before the word taking, or the truma, the gift, comes before taking. But we still ask, why is taking there at all? It still doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense so far that you're going to put it first, but what do you need it at all there for? So you're going to say something absolutely brilliant. I mean, I just get blown away by this stuff.
Rabbi Aaron?
Yes.
Okay. Here's an example when you go to the IDF. You join the IDF, okay? You are a mitnadif, a volunteer, but you have to go.
That's not volunteering at all. That's
Mayor,
totally by force.
Mayor, I want you to put your seatbelt on for a second. And after I finish the next 5 lines, I want you to tell me if you're still thinking the same line of thought, and then you can fill the blanks in to explain what it was you were thinking. He says that after somebody, it's a free will offering, he decides in his mind what he wants to give, and he makes a pledge, totally out of his own free will. Once he makes a pledge and verbalizes that pledge, the tax collectors can force him to pay up what he already pledged. And they can do it persuasively with their voices or with the strong arm of the law. And that's what it means when it says, Zot ha-truma asher tikhu mitam. This is the truma that you take from them. After they already made the pledge, then you take it from them with the strong arm, because between the time they made the pledge until the time the pledge is due, they had what we call regret. You have buyer's regret, you can have a pledge regret. Correct? You ever have buyer's regret? Yeah. Okay. I don't know if you have pledge regret, but if you made a pledge and then all of a sudden the stock market started tinkering down and you weren't sure you were able to fulfill your pledge. So that's one, I don't know what else could have happened, but maybe your wife, you got home and your wife said, what? Yeah. What did you do? I needed a new dress. We have, the tuition is going up next year. Yeah. The kids all need new clothes. They got dental, who knows, whatever.
What were you thinking?
What were you thinking? Okay, guys, this is just the beginning. We're just scratching the surface here. Mayor, I wanted to hear what you had to say. So it's not at all in line with what you were thinking, but I think you were onto something nevertheless.
I just wanted to give you an example.
Where it's possible.
Comparison to what but an example was, when you joined the Israeli army, you come to the service and say, you're not obligated to, but you're a mitnadev, you're a volunteer, but you have to.
That's not volunteering.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had 3 kids in the army. I don't think any of them looked at it as a volunteer, except for my son that came back from America to serve. Okay, so they honored him. Unbelievable. He was. They couldn't believe that he came back. When he was 18, he's also an American citizen. He went for a year to America. He made a lot of money, and he came back to serve in the army. And I think they were saluting him. I mean, they couldn't believe. They were so happy that now he's back in America. But it's okay. He came back just to serve.
Wonderful. That's the way it should be.
Okay, so now we understand when it says, speak to the children of Israel, and they shall give to me the truma, right? You're supposed to take from them the truma. So this is, I'm going to just read it in English so we understand clearly. Let them take my portion. So who's them? The tax collectors. Let them take my portion. It's the tax collectors you need to appoint. Okay, so we appoint these tax collectors who are supposed to take the gifts, the truma. But what is a prerequisite for this tax collector? This is, I mean, what's going on in America, I think anywhere in the world. This is the way God wants us to act. What does he say? That before this guy can go out and collect taxes from anybody else, he's got to pay first. He's got to pay up. Because there's this whole idea that if you're not clean, if you're not ornamented, right, you made yourself beautiful, and you can't make anybody else beautiful. If you're clean, how can you make anybody else clean? Right? The whole idea is to pay up. So if you're corrupt...
There was a situation here in Israel very recently where a certain city wanted to shut down all the stores on Shabbat, and then they had hired Jewish people to inspect on Shabbat and hand out fines for tickets for being open on Shabbat. This is exactly what you're talking about.
So this is very important, and I'll just read in Hebrew so you get the idea. Before they can make the claim for other people, they have to give their own portion in order to beautify or to ornament themselves first. And only afterwards are they able to take from the others. Now, interesting, because also there's a vav. Now, yikhu should be they let them take, but there's a vav, and let them take. Now the vav, let them take, also does what we say about biblical Hebrew? Biblical Hebrew, the vav does what? It turns it from past tense to future tense, or future tense to past tense. This proves they had already taken, because it's future tense, that they shall take, but no, that they have to have already taken from themselves. But what about when it comes to from each person who gave from his own free will? His liba was daveh el hanetina. It ached him and pained him towards giving, because he doesn't want to give from his ratzon tov. He's not willing to give. He's a very miserly person, and he's not willing to give. So we're concerned that he'll start fighting with the tax collector, right? If the guy's tight-fisted, miserly, and he he doesn't want to give, anytime a tax collector, you're going to do what you can to get out of it, right? So what are we going to do? It says, then the second one is az tikachu, you shall take it. Who's that? Moses and Aaron. Originally, we're going to send Gabayim. We have to appoint Gabayim. But they're not going to give to just any guy. When you send leaders, they're less likely to fight. You send the president of the shul, you send the rabbi, you send an important person, and the people might even give more. This is how it works. Okay? When the president comes to your house, it's on me, whatever you want.
No way. Tell him get out.
Huh?
Tell him get out.
Oh, yeah, right. Moshe and Aaron. Or any Nisiye Yisrael. Now the word for a leader is Nisiye, is Nasi. We're going to examine that letter, that word itself. Kivada Yisu Penehem. By the Nasi coming, the important person coming, the people, but you know what it means to reflect or to mirror? So when you're smiling in a good mood, it's contagious. My rabbi told me it's contagious. You're around sorrow people and depressed people, it's going to affect you.
Or you can be a light bringer.
So if you bring raised up people, the other people will be raised up and they won't fight with them. And now we understand the word yidvenu as yin davenu, which is a language according to Rashi. We saw that it's a nadiv lev, a willing heart. So then if we understand it that way, then everything we're talking about is going on what was said before. What was that? V'yichuli, who should take from me? The tax collectors should take from me the gift from each and every person. Yidvenu, nidivos libo, whose heart is motivating him. Mamela nishma. So then they're willing and they're gonna hear it. Shema sha'amarachacha. But what it says afterwards, tichva trumati, take my truma. God says that is mashma atem ba'atzmachem tichachu, that you yourselves are going to have to take. So we're talking about two different types of givers: those that are willing to give and those that are not willing to give. And if they're not willing to give, then you have to actually take it yourselves, because they are not nadiv lev, for the reasons we mentioned already above. Now, in chapter 35, verse 5, which I think I have here.
Right here.
Which number? Okay, well that's later on. If you look at number 5 for right now, on the source sheet, Exodus 35:5, take from yourselves an offering for the Lord. Every generous-hearted person shall bring it, namely the Lord's offering, gold, silver, copper. This is later on. We're in chapter 25. So in chapter 35, we're talking about those 13 items again. And you can see clearly that this is somebody who is giving generously, right? Kol nadiv lev yaviu. Anybody who is generous of heart, he's the one bringing it. So you have we have two types of people. One guy, if he regrets, so you got to take it from him. If he's not regretful, he's going to bring it. It's going to come by itself.
Deliberately.
Shema mina, what do you hear from this? Shemidaber b'misha liba dova v'koev. That we're talking about in our part. In other words, over there, we're talking about someone who's totally into his gift, and he doesn't have any regrets. Over here, we're talking about someone, in chapter 25, we're obviously talking about someone who does have a regret, and that's why it says you have to take it from him. The word kicha. Remember we asked, why is kicha taking it all mentioned by our third category? So this helps you answer that. But what about someone who's totally willing with his own heart? He's going to bring it on his own, and you don't need to force him at all. And as you notice in chapter 35:5, you don't have the word. Let's just see. I did see it in the English. Let's see in the Hebrew. Kechu mi'itchem truma. Okay. So I don't know how to answer that. But Rashi says on that verse, Nadiv Lev, since his heart moved him to generosity, he's called generous-hearted. As already explained, the offering of the Mishkan in our verse that we're dealing with now. Okay. And he says, I'm not sure, let's see. Okay. So he talks about the third. Remember, Tichachu is mentioned by the third Trumah, which is coming through a free will offering. And Yesh Devarim Acherim Bago. There's other things that are going to be taught by the way. Shim Yavo Gaboim Chashuvim. If you send very important tax collectors to the mitnadev, to the person who's going to give, Bli Safek, there's no doubt. Sheyisa Penehem V'yitnadev Yoter. You may not agree. If you don't agree with Trump's policy, so you're not going to be so happy. But, you know, he was elected. So if he comes to your business, it's that day, you know, believe me, you know you're going to get compensated. So you'll say, whatever you want is yours, okay? But here in this case, so if you send the more important person, the person would yisa panehem. They would be uplifted. They would have a countenance, and they would likely give more than if you had just sent a regular Joe Smith to go collect the taxes. He says, this is why we do, Mayor, this is why we make these auctions in synagogue. We actually sell honorariums, honorees. So not every shul does it. Many of the outreach shuls don't do it because we understand not everyone really realizes the value of some of these aliyot and kibudim. But many times it's just on the holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. They do a public auction. They do it in Yiddish. And it's got to be the funniest thing, right? They start selling. You're not buying anything right now. You're making a pledge, a public pledge. And even at fundraising dinners, they get people to raise their hand to take on a project. So this, in other words, this is called peer pressure. You like that?
Totally.
Ula yisa panehem. Perhaps they will be more generous. Okay, we're learning some very deep Jewish wisdom here. Okay, now getting back to the idea of the Barbanel, he mentioned that they also give this charity. They have to give the shkalim, the half shekel. And even though, yes, we do talk about it being obligatory, nevertheless, it's given as charity, and it acts as an atonement for the soul. As we see, that each person is giving from his generous heart, and we said that means real generosity. And now we understand that it's going on what? On both the truma that came before and the truma that came after. To teach you what? That those two trumas are really ultimately dependent on the giving of the heart. If it's acting as charity and it's acting as an atonement, wouldn't you want it? It's only half a shekel. It's only $11 times 2. But the Truma Shlishit, which doesn't need any forcing, it's a total, It's a total, a free gift from the heart. Was it a Pat Benatar song?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why you don't even need to mention those words. Remember we said, why does it say from every man whose heart motivates him between number 1 and 2? That really doesn't make sense. Because that's what it should be. It's not, it's an obligatory thing, but it should be from your own free will. Whereas the third one already is from your own free will, and therefore it doesn't need to be said. It's so obvious. And you don't like that answer, I can see in your eyes. I'll just read the words. Ki pshita shiba b'nadav lo b'chova. Ki kvar nirma ze b'ma she'ekdim truma el kicha. It was already mentioned that the truma comes before the taking. So it's so clear the third one is a free will offering, you don't need to mention it.
Mm-hmm.
But in the first two, which are obligatory, you need to mention it, because that's how it's supposed to be. Okay, we're getting somewhere, right?
This is good.
It's getting better, just wait. Now, according to those first two trumas, we already know, yes, they're obligatory, and they act as an atonement. And that's why I want you to look at chapter 30, verse, I think it's 15. That's number 6. Even though we looked at it, we're going to look at the Rashi a little bit more carefully. The rich shall not give more, the poor shall not give less than half a shekel, with which to give the offering to the Lord to atone for your souls. This is acting as an atonement. Giving money is going to atone for your soul. It's like Twilight Zone. I mean, you guys read these verses a million times. And how you got caught up in different things, I don't know. Right? I mean, okay. So let's look at Rashi. To atone for your souls. That they should not be struck by a plague because of the counting. That's one explanation. Another explanation is going to go through what we just pretty much talked about. What does it mean to atone for your souls? It was written because God hinted to them they were going to make these 3 offerings. One, an offering to the Lord. Meaning the word Truma is written there 3 times. The first represents, and we're going to discuss it in detail, is the sockets for the Mishkan. That's the Adonim, that's the sockets where the planks of wood go into. Moses counted them, meaning counted the half shekels when they commenced with the donations of the Mishkan. Everyone gave half a shekel, and it amounted to 100 talents, as the verse says in Exodus 38:25. And the silver of the community census, that's how we took a census, was 100 talents. And the sockets were made from this, as the verse says in 38, verse 27. Okay, that's the first. The second Truma was collected also through counting, and that's the one that's done every year, because once you have the sockets and you have all the materials, that's done deal. It's this middle one that we do every year, but we give 3 half shekels as a remembrance for, hopefully the base of Mikdash will be rebuilt sooner on days with the coming of Mashiach. Okay, that was a prayer and a yelp for the coming of the Messiah and the building of our temple. And I should add, this is the most, I shouldn't say it's the most important one, but it feels like it is, for the ingathering of all our brothers and sisters. Okay, so the second offering was counted after the Mishkan was erected, and we counted the people, right? That's how we counted the people. Look in Numbers 1:1. There's a census. Everyone gave. And what's it used for? For the purchase of communal sacrifices. The rich and poor were equal. They gave equally. Okay, now concerning that second one, what are we giving it for? We're giving it for the communal offerings, to atone for your souls. Because the sacrifices are brought for the purpose of atonement. This is not individual atonement. This is not because I sinned. First of all, you should know that if I sinned, only inadvertently do I bring a sin offering. If I sinned on purpose, there's no offering. I'm forbidden. They will not take an offering. It's only repentance. These blood sacrifices only come because of accidental sins.
But these light switch on Shabbat or something.
It's an accidental sin. No, you don't have to bring an offering for that.
You don't bring an offering for accidental?
It's accidental. No, there's a difference, because if we're talking about shogeg, it's not accidental. Tonight's not the time for that, but we will get into it for sure. And the third one, that was used to build the Mishkan. Whoever set aside an offering of silver and copper, you can see that in Exodus 35:24. Not everyone gave the same amount, but each gave whatever his heart inspired him to give. Okay, so that was like a nice little, recap. But if you go now to Ezekiel 18:4, which is number 7 on your source sheet, what does God say? Behold, all souls are mine. Like the soul of the Father, like the soul of the Son, they are mine. Okay? This gets into, again, the idea, we're all part of God. You can't divide God up. And only then you're allowing the evil eye, because it's a part. The whole thing is damaging. It's like it's setting your whole reality in a false reality. And therefore, sin and the negative forces can take a root. But when you're embedded in God, in the Holy One, nothing can harm you. You hear what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, our
powerful.
souls are part of God. All souls are mine, like the soul of the Father, like the soul of the Son, they are mine. And what is this whole idea of giving the half shekel? It's the kindness of God. He loves us so much. It's the chesed of God that he takes from us the coin instead of, or in exchange for, our soul. That's why it says in the first thing, V'chulei. What did we say? We say, let them take from me a portion. And in the second one, it's Trumati, my portion. God already calls it my portion. The second one. And we're dealing with that aspect in the second one. Because the name of God is called upon it, upon that portion. When it comes to the third one, which is not obligatory at all, it doesn't relate to Hashem. It relates to the person giving it. As it says, this is the Trumah that you shall take from them. It's totally dependent on them. That's what it says you're going to take it from them, but it's not from Hashem that Lo meis Hashem hayas azos chova. It's not even obligatory. He says, now, it makes the most sense for me to say what I'm about to tell you. Another reason why the first two Trumas relate to God and not the third. Since every place you have, it's called Geder Anava, the status of humility. Wherever you have the status of humility and Hachna'ah means subjectivity, being subjected to Hashem, amongst human beings in this world, there you have the strength of God. This is very fundamental. Because where does the divine presence dwell? He dwells with the humble, the meek, and the downtrodden. Of any place that you have haughtiness, God doesn't want to put his name with that person. Therefore, the two Trumas that come in the beginning, then there was the hand of everybody. Everybody's equal in that. Mm-hmm. Remember, the first two Trumas have God's name on it. Mm-hmm. And then we're all equal. Nobody is putting themselves above anyone else. As it says that the rich cannot give more and the poor cannot give less. As we see in chapter 30, verse 15, which we read already. There's no place for one person to glorify himself and to place himself above another human being. By saying what? My Trumah, the gift that I gave, was better or greater than your gift. If I could say that, well, at first it's a very disgusting thing to say.
Your heart's not right.
It's saying not only is my gift, my whole being, my soul is better than your soul. Right? Gosh.
Some people do.
Otam yiches Hashem's bracha. But no. That's why God puts his name on it. The first one, he says, take for me, lishmi, for my sake. Because we already explained above, and somewhere else he says, B'kol makom asher eskor shmi, this is in chapter 20, verse 21. Exodus chapter 20, verse 21. We did this, I think, last week. An altar of earth you shall make for me. You shall slaughter besides it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your cattle. Wherever I allow my name to be mentioned, God says, I will come to you and bless you. He blesses you. When his name is mentioned, when his name is involved, and he attaches his name, there's a blessing. Now, do you remember that we said, okay, this is going way back, months. When you take the gematria of God's name, which we know is 26, but we take each letter and make a gematria out of it. In other words, the word Yud, it's a letter, but it's also a word. Yud Vav Daled, it's 20. Vav, Vav Aleph Vav, that is 16, it's 13, right? You have Hey, Hey Aleph, that's 6. Out of all the 22 letters in the alphabet, there are 4 letters, well really 3, right? Vav, Hey, and Yud. They're the smallest of the total equation of all gematrias. Because God, yes, in his ultimate wisdom, he created the Hebrew language. He made his own name the smallest of all possible letter combinations because of humility. Where you find the greatness of God is where you find his humility. Remember, we're here to follow God. He wants us to act godly. So we have to act with humility and meekness. It's called Geder and Nava. That all of the letters of God's great name teach us about the Geder and Nava. Look over there, we already spoke about that. And, okay. Now, he says, okay, I'm going to try it. The way you're making it an offering is similar to the offering itself. Meaning, that just like everybody was equal, right? All the amounts are equal. Again, he's just stressing that nobody can raise themselves up upon anyone else. So too, the sockets, the first one is used for the sockets. What are the sockets? It's the lowly base that's raising the entire building. The building will not stand, the building cannot be raised without the solid, heavy piece of silver that's serving as the...
Can we say foundation?
Foundation. Kikol Adanim, wait till you hear the word, what Adanim means. That every Adanim are equal each to itself. It's like, you know, they're all like cookie cutters, right? They're made from a mold, they're all the same. Just like the people who gave them are all the same. The product is all the same. There's an equation between the giver and the product.
There's a commonality.
Now you hatachtonim l'kol binyan. They are the bottom of the building, like the mat on the threshold. That it is the yesod l'kol, it's the foundation of the entire building. Kemohem, just like they are, that's what they make. Meaning the people who gave, they were lowly, meaning equal. Nobody's raising themselves above anybody else. And what they made from them is the same thing. Just like, okay, it's basically saying the same thing. And nobody's allowed to raise themselves up. Again, the word nisuot. Again, the word nasi means prince. I want to tell you something else. My wife and I, we look up words in the Hebrew dictionary. We have discussions. The word nisui means married. It's from the word to raise up. That you raise each other up. That you carry, means to carry. Anyway, I guess that's why they carry the bride across the threshold on the wedding night. Hot diggity dog.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good stuff.
So too, this is exactly what's made. They make with them the Adanim. The Adanim are these sockets. And what does it teach you? About the Geder Anava, this attribute of the status of being meek. Because being Anava, being meek and humble, is ultimately the foundation for what? The building where God is going to dwell and which all of Israel is based upon. And that's why they're called Adanim. Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, Mem. And what do you hear from the word? Adnus. Adnus means mastery and authority. How do you hear it? He says, that through anybody who makes himself like a floor mat at the threshold down below, Hashem makes him a Adon, a master above, from above. Anybody who's mashpil atzmo, who brings himself down, a Kadosh Baruch who raises him up. He's also yosod. He becomes a foundation stone, which ultimately, because he's actually raising the entire building, just like the Adonim, just like these sockets are the foundation stone and actually carry the entire building. And now he says that's why the word Nasi is the word for the prince or the leaders, because he carries others. You hear this? Pirushahu noise esacherim, the prince carries others. Kulam nishanim olav, everyone leans on him. Okay. Now that's the first truma. The first truma we said was for the sockets. The second truma is for the atonement of the soul, as we said, for the karbanos. So he says the second truma was for the communal offerings. Again, everybody had an equal portion in those. Kevus echad, b'boker, sheni ben arbayim. If you look in number 9 on the source sheet, Exodus 39:29. One lamb you bring up in the morning, and the other one, they're the same. You bring up the same. But what does it say in Tehillim? We're going over this. I know this sounds repetitive, but this is Judaism 101. Number 10 on the source sheet. What are these sacrifices? What is the purpose of a sacrifice? The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit. Oh God, you will not despise a broken and crushed heart. Zivke Elokim Ruach Nishbora, meaning to say that the purpose of these offerings is to bring a man to a broken heart. He sees that animal slaughtered and he says to himself, but for the grace of God, that should have been me. I sinned. I sinned and I deserved a punishment. And in place of my punishment, this animal is my replacement. That's why also number 2 relates to God. So number 1 related to God, number 2 related to God. As it says, you should take my truma, God says, because that truma, because it was made from these people that all made themselves equal with each other, meaning humble. Therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu said, "This is my truma. This belongs to me." He attaches himself to such a. Guys, still there? Do I get cut off at any times? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so now what about the third truma? The third truma was all the 13 materials that were given, and that was the one that was a free will offering. Okay? He mentions the third one was not equal. Not equal. That it didn't matter. You can give more or less. That the rich could give more, and he's allowed to raise himself up, right? There's this aspect of it happening. It's going to happen. I'll just read in Hebrew. Oh, we've been talking about not raising yourself up so many times, but here we're going to say like this. About Truma Shlishit, Shelo Yakol Shavim Bo, Hayu Matchalfim Pabachot V'Yeter, Ki Osher Noten Harbe, Yesh Lo Makom Litnasut Al Ha'ani. And there's like place, there's allowing, God is allowing a place. Doesn't mean it's right, but he's allowing it to happen. And what's the person going to say? Yesh li chelik gadol bebeis Elokeinu yoter min ha'ani. I have even a greater place in the house of God than the poor person. Al kein nasu mimeno kol klei kodesh. That's why all the vessels are made, right? The tabernacle and the vessels are made from that money. Kamo ha'aron, just like the holy ark, the menorah, the candlestick, the candelabra, the shulchan, the bread of the table for the showbreads, the mizbeach, the altar, and the rest of the vessels. So without any doubt, shaya yitaron l'ktsam al ktsatam, there actually is a value. There's different value attributed to these different these different vessels. And not only that, there's a crown on 3 of the items. You have a crown on the ark. You have a crown on the mizbeach, the incense mizbeach, and you have a crown on the shulchan. Now, if you know anything about the different promises and different, when we say like this, that malchut, there's the shulchan where the breads are, and then that's interesting. There's a crown on the table of showbreads. That crown represents what? Malchut. Why? Because Malchut, the kingship, is rooted in Beit Lechem. Right? King David comes from Beit Lechem. So Mashiach comes through David. So there's some relationship to the house of bread. The responsibility of the king is to provide, as they say in America, more jobs, make America great again.
Sustenance.
Protection and sustenance. That's the job. So that's why kingship, so kings come through David, come through Yehuda. So that table represents that. The Mizbeach, the incense altar, represents Aaron, Kahuna. People, they're Kohanim. They come from the tribe of Levi and Kohen. And that represents that the crown upon the incense altar represents them. And what about the crown around the Aron Kodesh? That's represent anybody who connects themselves to Torah. That's free to everyone. Okay? That's available to everybody. So let me just read it. So that's when we have the vessels are all on different levels. Everybody's on a different level. Some are connected to Kahuna, some are connected to Malchut, and some are going to be connected to the Torah. So Apapish, Shekfi Kedusha Sakelim Hoilo LaHakadosh Baruch Liaches Nadav Zu Elav Yisbrach. Nevertheless, after the fact, let me just read this again, sorry. We said that there's these different vessels, they're on different levels. So Apapish, Shekfi Kedusha Sakelim. There is holiness to each vessel that God relates to the giving, this free will gift that is going towards that. Nevertheless, after the fact, Shkebias Hanadava Hayasham Tzad Gava, but because there is some aspect of people raising themselves above others, there's a problem here. Lamar Be'hamut, because there are people that are able to give more. That's why God does not attach his name to that third. You follow so far? Mm-hmm. The first 2, God attached themselves, attached his name.
Correct.
But the third, he doesn't attach his name because there is a place, whether it's right or wrong, okay? It just is that people are on different levels, right? You have king, right? You said Levi, Cohen, you got Malchut, you got people attached to Torah and all. Everybody's an individual. And because everyone's an individual, that's when Hashem does not attach his name to that third truth. Clear? Clear as mud?
Yes, no.
This is, guys, is this incredible or what?
Amen.
Okay, we're in for the home stretch here. That's what it's called. He wants to answer one very important question. After the fact that the actual person, when we saw in verses, I'm going to say, right, the end of 3 through 7, right? You have gold, silver, copper, turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, linen, goat hair, red dyed ram skins, tachi skins, acacia wood, oil for illumination, spices for the anointment oil, and the aromatic incense. I just want to stop there before reading number 7. They're actually in order of value, starting with gold, down, 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 down. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 things are shoham stones and stones for the settings, which are obviously valuable stones. So he says, after the fact, you have this order, as we see. Gold, silver, copper. So if so, why did they count? Why is it considered, you have these precious stones at the end? You have an order, now it's out of order. Something's wrong. What's wrong? I don't know, let's find out. Guys, you still with me? So these stones at the end are obviously more valuable than anything else. So, but why are they at the end? So he says, even though you're able to actually answer what we well know through the Medrash, that what happened, that the princes, you know what they did? They said, whatever the people don't bring, we'll do. We'll do. We'll bring. We'll donate.
Now, it wasn't necessarily a prideful thing. It was just they were able to do it thing.
Wait,
right? I mean,
maybe. Let's hear what he has to say.
Okay.
We're going to see that. Well, let's see.
Okay.
Since Nassim brought those stones at the end, so just like Rashi brings, and you can read it in Parsha Trumah, that's chapter 35, verse 27. Therefore, it mentions their gift at the end. Nice, great. Goes according to what you said. Nevertheless, Gam Lefi Darkenu, according to everything that we have already said, you're able to say the following: that Hashem wanted to do what? To show them what? That whether you gave a little or whether you gave a lot, everyone's equal in the eyes of God. That's why God himself mentions it at the end. You think you're all so great and good, you gave all the valuable stuff. Putting you at the end. So you'll see that it's not so great.
It's good.
So that the wealthy person does not glorify himself above the poor person. And even though if he gave, I'm going to give greater, and therefore I should be at the top of the list. I give, my name should be on the building. Imagine putting the cornerstone. You know. And not only that, it's mentioned their gifts last because of a haughtiness that they had. So therefore, that's why Yitnadvu Hatzibur, they said, let everyone else give. And whatever's missing, we'll pay up. He claims this was arrogance. Meaning, Yeshla Yedenu Limalos Mashem Chashrim. They said, we have so much wealth, we'll give whatever's missing. Therefore, their gift is mentioned only at the end. Ki kol hamagbias atzmo, whoever raises themselves up, Hashem puts him down. And guess what? The word nasi that's used in the Torah is missing a yud. It's lacking the one letter out of nun. How does it say? A nun shin yud aleph. It's missing the yud. No matter what, it's missing the yud. It's missing the one letter of God's name that is, your dinner's over there, by the way, is missing from the word nasi. Okay, you can look and see that in chapter 35, verse 27, which I don't think I have, 35:27. See the word? Lahanasiim. There's no yud. How do you have? You see it, chapter 35, verse 27. The one letter of God's name is not in there. That is part of the root, and yet it's missing. Kirak ot echad min Hashem hagado chakuk b'shem nasi. It's only that one letter that's part of God's own name, and that would be the yud in the word of the princes, and it's missing. And why? Because they raised themselves up. So God took away that glory. Which what again reflects this whole idea of Geder Anava, of the reflection of the status of humility and how great it is. Mikol hamakom asher asker shmi avo elecha, as God said in that blessing we already saw in verse 20, verse 21. That was in last week's Parsha, right? Or 2 weeks ago. The altar of earth you shall make for me. Wherever I allow my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. Where God meets you, you will be blessed. This is what he says, okay, guys? He says this is the foundation of foundations for the entire Torah. And the Tzuras HaYud, the actual way a Yud is written or drawn, it's the smallest letter. It's tiny. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. That reflects upon the fact that it is humble and small. And that's why we, the Jews, are called Yidden. Okay, so I want to wish you all good Shabbos. I'm not hanging up with you guys. I just wanted to say good Shabbos to the camera. And we look forward to seeing you again next week.